All right, so this video is mainly for the guys in my regiment, the Recon Support Company. If anybody stumbles across this video, however, there's a lot of things here I'm just going to talk about that I've learned through experience. I've clocked in about 400 hours in the game right now. So if you do stick around, this is something that you can learn if you're interested in reconnaissance and that kind of role in the game. But yeah, this is going to be very long, all right? You have been warned. But it's because I'm going in depth into everything that I've learned, everything that I know. And for the most part, this will be the first time that I'm going to like lay in stone, kind of like more like written down for the most part, what it is that our regiment is supposed to do, how it's supposed to operate. This is probably the first cornerstone in our doctrine and tactical playbook. So this is what I'm going to talk about in this set of slides. I'm going to go through what the mission types are, describe in general what they are mainly and what's the objectives of fulfilling such missions. Then I'm going to go through the order of battle, all right? I'm going to walk through all the weapons and equipment that we manufacture, produce, and the stuff that we're supposed to use, basically. Is the things that we prepare in order for us to operate. And the raid section here, this is the first time I've given a name to it. It's an idea that I've been working on for quite some time now. And it's basically the way that we're going to operate on the front lines and also for our raiding missions. And I'll go in detail into how the order of battle works in our mission types here, the supply line raiding and forward reconnaissance. Okay, so first thing, mission types. Listed here are the three types of combat missions that we as a regiment are supposed to do. All right, supply line raiding is basically cutting logistics. That's what the conventional name for it is. Every time that a massive operation or offensive is going on, it needs logistics in order for it to keep running. All right, so our job is to find where the enemy is attacking, or even in some cases where they're defending as well, because logistics also works for defense. Logistics basically is the blood and the lifeline of anything in this game. Right? If you don't have the equipment and the supplies to run the front line, then it just collapses. And our job is to identify where enemy supplies are operating in, which roads and which routes they're taking, find out where they are, find out which ones are more active than others, and once they're identified, we go out and we destroy any logistics going in and out of the area that we're fighting in, basically. Cut the logistics. The second one here is a very more specialized role, and it hasn't really been done by anybody, at least so far that I've been able to identify. I talked a little bit about this in one of my previous videos in talking just purely about reconnaissance. I'm going to go in depth into this and walk you through how I've done it as a solo player and how it can be further expanded upon if you get more people on with the plan and the doctrine, basically. But forward reconnaissance is a more frontline battlefield role, right? If you work in conjunction with larger regiments and larger combat units, this is where we fulfill a role that helps multiply the effect of any friendly forces that are operating on the front lines. Now, the deep strike raids, I'm not going to talk about in this video. This topic here, this mission type, it deserves its own kind of video because it's very different from these two other mission types. And the way you go about doing it, it's yeah, I'll make a separate video on that. So we won't be talking about this. But just to give a general idea of what it is, it's basically where we go behind enemy lines, and we're talking back lines, right? We're not talking supply line raiding. We're talking all the way back into the logistic axis. Identify facilities and big bases, see if any of them are poorly defended, and if they are poorly defended enough, we will go in and we will knock out the facility, basically. Yeah, that's what the deep strike raids are for, to knock out enemy facilities and bases. Okay, weapons and equipment. We'll start with the infantry stuff. That's the basic. So what do I mean by light infantry equipment, and what do I mean by it being specialized? Basically, for doing reconnaissance or forward reconnaissance or supply line raiding, the equipment that we use are usually very hard to find on the front line, right? We're talking binos, radios, flamethrowers, radio backpacks. These are things that not a lot of people use, really, all right? But it's something that we are going to use a lot. Okay, we even use these equipment more so than rifles and 7.62 ammunition, really. Yeah, that's what I mean by this right here. It also means that it's hopefully it gives you the idea of how we want to operate. So, for example, we don't have any tripod weaponry, right? If we're going behind enemy lines and we're bringing in tripods to set up a mounted tripod weapon, we're doing something wrong because that's like really heavy equipment that is not mobile, it's not fast, it's very slow and tedious and cumbersome to operate. We don't do that. We're not going to use weapons like that, right? Everything around this regiment is revolving around speed and mobility, right? So light infantry equipment is specialized in the sense of reconnaissance, that we want uh, sensory equipment, visual scouting equipment, intelligence equipment, that sort of stuff. Now, the vehicles, now this is basically the core of our regiment as we start operating. For the most part, we really can't operate the way that we want to operate until jeeps are tech. So that's easily the first 2 days of the war. We're not going to be really in action. But after that, as we unlock all the different vehicles here, we start getting into the operational capacity of the regiment. We can start influencing the outcomes of battles on the front line. So listed here are all the vehicles, and I'm going to go in depth into each and every one. So this section, weapons and equipment, is going to be the largest part of this whole set of slides, really. Uh, I'm just going to go walk you through why we are going to use each and every of these types of vehicles and how they're supposed to operate in the regiment and our order of battle. So first off, the Jeep. The Jeep is the core unit of the whole regiment. All right, and there are a lot of reasons why. First of all, it's very fast and very mobile. The Argonaut here is the fastest vehicle, I'm pretty sure, on road and off road, I believe. So if you ever get in trouble when you're deep behind enemy lines, you just hop in the Jeep and you just run, and nobody will be able to catch you, basically. But in the way that this regiment is going to be operating, the Jeep provides the main reconnaissance element and also the logistics element, right? Some people may be looking at this and be scratching their heads because no normal person uses a Jeep for logistics. But what I found is that a Jeep is actually a very useful tool for logistics because of its off-road capability. If you're using a truck of some kind, you go off-road, players, normal infantry can outpace you by just running faster than your off-road speed capability in the truck. That's how slow trucks are off-road. And because of the way that the regiment is going to be operating, we're going to be operating off-road a lot. And the Jeep pretty much fulfills all the needs that we really need in operating behind enemy lines and in a reconnaissance role on the flanks. So the Jeep, yeah, reconnaissance and logistics, that's what it's here for. The reconnaissance part, just so any new players are watching, if you have passengers in the Jeep, they can actually use their binoculars even while they're in the Jeep. So you can be fast, mobile, and also have the extended range of the binos going up about 120 meters. So yeah, this right here. If you get a 2-man unit in a Jeep, even the Odyssey, that's as good as a recon unit as any. It's probably the best. Now the armored car. So we're approaching this in the view of the tech, right? Because it's the way the game works. There's a tech tree and a tech progression, right? So armored cars and tankettes are one of the first armored vehicles that we get in the war, right? This is the early to mid-war kind of weaponry in terms of mobile armor. And the armored car platform for the colonials is very versatile. Partly because we get 3 types of variants. You have the Xiphos, which is a 7.92 dual barrel 7.92 machine gun platform. You have the Percusio, which is a 20 millimeter ATR platform, and the Gemini, which is a twin RPG launcher platform. And they have decent armor. Their on-road capability, speed in terms of speed, is actually pretty good. Their off-road is quite slow. That's one of the big drawbacks behind the armored car here. But for what we're trying to do, uh, if we just think of it as a weapon system, as a platform, this is perfect because we can get something that has some kind of armor with a decent amount of firepower, depending on which variant you have, and you can get them behind enemy lines. And if you do that, which is possible because I've done it, you can identify all the weak points of the enemy and just hit them hard, really hard, which you kind of lack if you're trying to do normal partisan work with just infantry. Because how are you going to bring like an RPG launcher or ATR all the way back there and then try to operate it for extended periods of time? As a lone infantryman just walking around, that's not going to be possible. So yeah, that's the armor car right here. And yeah, the last point here, for those who don't know, the majority of combat vehicles only have inventory slots for ammunition. As you go into the late war tanks, the really big tanks, they actually do have inventory slots. But yeah, we're not talking about that though. So yeah, this is the armor car here, and yeah, the role is fire support. It's here to support the reconnaissance element, which basically is the Jeep. So the Jeep goes out, finds targets, identifies threats, figures out where the enemy is weak, where they're strong, and then we move in our fire support into whichever targets we have identified to hit, and then hit them. Okay, next on the list, the tankettes. Tankettes we also get pretty early into the war as well. Usually it's the same time as the armored cars, either before or after, depending on how the tech tree for that specific war has been determined by the devs. Now, originally, in the original set of plans for this regiment, tankettes were not part of the plan. Partly because if you look at the tankette, it's on paper it's a really poor partisan vehicle, or in the sense of trying to do what we're trying to do. We're trying to be fast and mobile, and the tankette is not doesn't fit into that at all. It's very slow, even off-road. Although I should mention that off-road it is slightly faster than an armored car. That's one thing to it, but it doesn't have a turret. So in terms of maneuverability, it's very weak. All right, it takes a long time to turn. It can only shoot forward. But there is a window of opportunity in the war, and this also somewhat dependable on the tech tree, what the wardens get teched and what we as the colonials get teched. It may change war to war, but there is a window for the most part, on average, 2 to 3 day window where the tankette basically is one of our most powerful armored units in the war. And it is possible to get them behind enemy lines and do a lot of damage. The biggest strength about the tankette is the weapons that it brings. The base tankette, the Action, that's a 50 cal platform. The Ixion is a 30 millimeter cannon platform, and the Vesta is a flamethrower. I've never used the Vesta. I've used the other two, but I can see where the Vesta actually can be effectively used in a deep strike raid. But it is possible to use this because I have been on deep strike raids and I have made it all the way into enemy backline logic hexes with a tankette. You wouldn't think it would be possible, but it is possible. um, the last point here that I put is that the Action actually serves more as an IFV than any other unit, especially the half track. That's because it can carry 2 extra infantrymen in the back, and it has 4 inventory slots that can carry other items other than the ammunition. That's a very cool thing about the base tankette here. But yeah, there is a small window of opportunity where it is possible to use these vehicles to great effect in our strategy. And once again, this is fire support. Almost all the vehicles from now on, other than the Jeep, is basically just for fire support, with the exception of the half track, which we're going to get to soon. All right, so the half track. We're not too concerned with the other variants. There's another upgraded that's heavily armored but less mobile half track, and there's a mortar half track. I haven't used either one of those, and we're not in the position right now as a regiment to really experiment with them yet. Until we get more manpower, we're not going to be able to touch those other two variants. But the half track is a very good partisan vehicle because it's decent on-road and off-road speed. It is quite maneuverable off-road, unlike the tankette. And this is the part where it complements our lack of heavy weaponry for the infantry, is that it can mount tripod weapons. And the Colonials get access to a lot of tripod mounted weapons. So this right here sort of compensates for the lack of heavy infantry equipment. It's something that we can take behind enemy lines and still utilize if we do our job correctly, identify where the enemy is strong, where they are weak, and apply our strengths to their weaknesses. The extra thing here is that it can also provide as an infantry transport. So if we do operate a larger raiding party, we can always put in mechanized infantry into the back and go around and operate. This is another idea that I haven't been able to try yet, but in the forward reconnaissance world, half track could be very, very useful because in many cases, when front lines are engaged, the flanks lack infantry, and half track is something that's really fast that you can get infantry off to any emergency that's happening on the flanks. Okay, the final point here for light and medium tanks. So I've got a picture of a hatchet here and a falchion, and both of them have variants as well. The hatchet has two other variants, the Koneska, which is more heavily armored, is a little bit slower, but it has the boost ability, so it compensates for that a little bit. It has the Vulcan, which has a heavy flamethrower. The falchion can be upgraded to quite a number of other variants, most notably the Spather, which has a high velocity 40 mil cannon. All of them are useful because in terms of speed, the game isn't that well balanced. These tanks are actually faster than the armored cars off-road and the half-tracks. So, yeah, that's just how it works. People, when they think about doing backline raiding, partisan work, that kind of thing, they don't think that the tanks can actually operate. But I've had a lot of experience in using tanks to go behind enemy lines and doing what we're trying to do here in the Recon support company, and they work very, very well. They are very effective. Especially the Falchion here. Falchion has 3 inventory slots, so it can carry extra BMATs and fuel. So its range is pretty far, even without support units like the Jeep. So yeah, I've got decent on-road, off-road speed. It's a tank, so it's got decent armor, decent health, and the 40 millimeter weapon, which is the main kind of like weapon for most of the colonial armor. It's very good against pretty much all targets. It can work well against infantry, works well against armor. It's all-rounded, very good platform. And yeah, roll fire support. This is the late game kind of stuff that we're working with. Once we get these unlocked, all the rest of the vehicles sort of get obsolete. There's no real point in bringing an armored car or a tank kit, even a half track in some cases. Especially if we're doing supply line raiding, half tracks sort of get obsolete really fast. Uh, yeah, switching over to tanks. That's the late game order of battle that we're going to have to work with as a regiment.